We are delighted to be starting the day with a conversation celebrating Earth Day with EEI President Tom Kuhn, Guggenheim Partners Executive Chairman Allan Schwartz, and EEI Vice President for International Programs Dr. Lawrence Jones. The conversation will feature distinguished remarks from His Royal Highness Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. Without further ado, please welcome Lawrence to the stage for this special Earth Day session.
Hello and welcome to this very special session entitled A Conversation Celebrating Earth Day. Before I introduce and ask them to come on stage, Mr. Allan Schwartz, the Executive Chairman of Guggenheim Partners, and Tom Kuhn, President of EEI, I've just been thinking about what does Earth Day mean to all of us? And as I reflect, for me personally, Earth Day took a whole different meaning about 11 years ago when I saw my wife go through labor. And around 6/12 on Earth Day, our daughter was born. And from that day, Earth Day has meant a very different thing to me. Because every time I see my daughter growing up, I think of the stewardship and responsibility I have gotten to have a daughter. The same idea applies to the Earth. And so as we discuss and celebrate Earth Day, I urge each and every one of us to think of our responsibility to be on this planet and the stewardship we have to give in terms of making this a better planet, not just for us, but for future generations. And so with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Allan Schwartz, Executive Chairman of Guggenheim Partners, and Tom Kuhn, President of EEI.
Well, I'll start out, Lawrence, and that was such a great story. And I think that, this is a very, very special day. So happy Earth Day, everybody. And thank you for joining us for this conversation celebrating Earth Day at EEI's Global Electrification Forum. I am very, very proud of the extraordinary clean energy leadership being shown today and every day by EEI's member companies here in the United States and around the world. EEI's member companies are delivering the clean energy future that we are working to make our clean energy vision a reality for the customers and the communities that we serve. Today, 40% of the electricity in the United States comes from clean, carbon-free sources, including nuclear energy, hydropower, wind, and solar energy. Thanks largely to the leadership of EEI's member companies, I am glad to say that carbon emissions from the U.S. power sector are at their lowest level in more than 40 years and continue to fall. Today, our industry is doing what no one would have thought possible 5 to 10 years ago. Our track record over the past decade, together with our trajectory of continuing emissions reductions, show that we truly are committed to getting the energy we provide as clean as we can, as fast as we can. At every step, we have focused on maintaining the reliability and affordability that our customers value. And we have proven that powering the economy and protecting the environment can go hand in hand. Indeed, our industry provides some of the nation's best jobs and is a key partner on driving economic prosperity in communities across the nation. We have an extraordinary opportunity before us to tackle climate change. As President Biden's climate summit gets underway today, EEI's member companies are well positioned to be a major part of the climate solution, and we want to be part of the climate solution. With new technologies and the right policies, a 100% clean energy future can be more than a goal, it can be a reality. Again, thank you for your participation today, and it is a pleasure for me to turn it over to Allan Schwartz, the CEO of Guggenheim Partners and a really great friend and supporter of our industry. So Allan, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom. And I just want to briefly, there's a question about Earth Day. What does Earth Day really mean? And I think it's great that we're having this event on Earth Day. I believe that words can have meaning, and by calling today Earth Day, reminds everyone that all forms of life share just one planet called Earth. Hopefully it gathers our attention and unites the global community around constructive action. And Lawrence, I'm really touched by what you said about your daughter's birth on this day and what it made you think. And there's a quote that I really like, and I'd like to share with all of you that it should make us think about. It's that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. And hopefully, when we borrow it, we're going to return it in at least as good a condition as it was when they lent it to us.
Thank you, Allan. So let's have a quick conversation with you and Tom. And I remember I was preparing for this quick conversation, a brief conversation. I was reminded by someone that you should always be cautious when you ask to interview your boss, because you may ask a question and after that, that's your last question you're going to ask him. So, but I'm sure Tom is fair game. So Tom, let's start with you. So you talk about President Biden celebrating the Earth Summit. We've seen a lot of pledges coming from all over the world. Do you think that we're on this irreversible trajectory towards a cleaner energy future? What are you hearing from the power energy or the power industry stakeholders?
Well, I think we are definitely on the trajectory to 100% clean energy future. And, Earth Day is again, a special day. It increases everybody's awareness of the importance of conservation and environmental protection. It highlights how far we have come as an industry and as a nation and as a planet. But make no mistake, solving climate change has been called one of the greatest challenges of our time. And we really are taking it very, very seriously. EEI is member companies here in the United States, and as we've heard from the Global Electrification Forum, companies around the world, we're integral to the climate solution. President Biden today set an ambitious goal to reduce carbon emissions across the U.S. economy 50% below 2005 levels by 2030. And that's not very far away. And meeting this goal will require the participation of every sector of the U.S. economy, along with the new technologies and supportive policies that are inclusive, flexible, equitable, and attainable. But we want to remain leaders in reducing carbon emissions and will continue to push for ambitious reductions in carbon emissions in the decade ahead, while working to find the most efficient, affordable, and reliable path to clean energy and a cleaner economy.
So what about you, Allan? I mean, what are you hearing from investors and the financial institutions with regards to this trajectory?
Well, thank you. And I'll say it's an inside story, but Tom and I have bosses and they're our dogs, so we don't have to worry about upsetting people. Look, in the financial markets, the momentum in the marketplace is quite palpable and really building as we sit here. Investors are demanding a plan for action. Governments, by and large, have fallen behind the financial community in pushing for change, although President Biden's announcement is a good sign. Green bonds are an example of the markets taking an important step towards funding green businesses. And banks are taking steps to limit lending to carbon-intensive companies, which has its risks, but is a sign of the momentum in the marketplace. And I think, as we look forward, I'm going to tell you this. I believe that while there's been a lot of talk over the years about a carbon tax, I think that the business community is now taking the lead and asking for the creation of carbon credit markets. And what that's a sign of is the business community taking the lead. A carbon tax would tax users and then allow the government to find ways to incentivize investment. Carbon credits let the business community jump in and actually put their money behind the new technologies that can rapidly decarbonize our environment. So I look at this as business, again, taking the lead, the business and financial community. The CFTC had a group of companies that asked for a carbon market. They were actually saying, give us a carbon market, we'll put our dollars behind it. And I think this is really similar, quite frankly, to how the vaccine response to the COVID pandemic was the real response, and that came from the private sector. I believe that carbon credit markets and other things will be a way to catalyze efforts to get the business community behind bringing new technologies to scale.
So thank you, Allan. So Tom, Allan mentioned the vaccine as it relates to COVID. And one of the things that have intrigued me is the sort of a robust international collaboration we're seeing now as it relates to COVID. I understand the importance of collaboration. Now, EEI, Tom, has a tagline, Power by Association, and you've done an excellent job over the years in operationalizing what that means for the power industry. Can this idea of power by association be applied to other industries and even between governments? What's your view?
Well, Lawrence, I don't simply think that power by association can work across industries and between governments. I think that it must, particularly with a really big, crucial issue like this one. Take the first part of the question. Our position is and always has been that we should take an economy-wide approach to addressing climate change. That means transitioning more of the economy, particularly the transportation and industrial sectors, to clean, efficient electric energy. Doing this will help significantly reduce carbon emissions and lead to a cleaner economy. And once again, EEI member companies are leading the way, developing innovative partnerships with technology companies, customers, and other stakeholders to electrify transportation and other parts of the economy. And partnerships with and between governments will be crucial to realizing our clean energy vision as well. So here in the United States, we are encouraged that there are more policymakers on both sides of the aisle who want to address climate change and to advance clean energy. And we look forward to working with them in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully on collaborative, innovative, and bipartisan solutions.
Thanks, Tom. Allan, over to you. So a few years ago, you did an interview or conversation with David Rubenstein at Duke University, in which I discovered then that you were a prolific baseball player in college. And had it not been for an injury, I'm assuming you would have been in a different profession today. And I'm sure sports, as it always does, gives insights into how you make decisions. And so using a baseball analogy here, as the leaders prepare to go to COP26, what should they be doing to sort of, I would say, load the bases and and do what they need to do to hit a home run when they get to Glasgow? What insight from your baseball world would you give them as they prepare to load the bases for home run?
Well, that's a nice question. Look, goal setting in sports is most certainly in line with goal setting in business. Actually, before I became a washed up baseball player, I had to retire after my freshman year as a college basketball player. And actually, basketball is the sport that I think has the most applicability to what we all have to do. Because basketball is teamwork that has to react and quickly react to things as they're happening. And what you really see is sometimes one player needs to take the ball and lead, and sometimes it's another player. And I think that's where, what I've said before, I think the private sector is taking the ball and needs to continue to do that. Government is just not in the ability to get in the front of this. They can follow behind. Consumers want this, but they don't have the capacity to talk about how to actually build not only clean energy, but dependable energy, right? And so it's the business sector, the private sector. And what I see, part of the reason I've been so impressed since I got involved with EEI, quite frankly, is bringing the power sector together is required to do this. If you look at what's going to happen, we all know if we're going to go to electric vehicles, if everybody's going to be doing meetings over computers, there's going to be a lot of consumption and demand for electricity, right? And so we're going to need not only solar, wind, and battery storage, et cetera. We're going to need advanced nuclear. We're going to need hydrogen power. And it's got to be brought together in a way that can deliver at a price what consumers and businesses really need. And that's what I think what EEI is doing is so important, is I think the industry has to come together. They have to agree what we'll invest in together. They have to agree what we'll deploy, because we need to put together something that can give us a sustainable climate benefit, but also a sustainable business model that can be invested behind. So I think basketball is the one where it's now private investors, private industry taking the ball. And I think that the EEI bringing the power on a global basis, because this, again, remember, Earth is global.
Yeah.
Putting together plans and things that the government can then get behind with regulation. But I think industry takes the lead. And that's what you're doing, which is what I like.
I really like your basketball analogy, Allan, because I think it also reminds us that the importance of certainty. So when you're on the field and playing basketball, the referees have to call, and they have to be certain about the calls they made, and they cannot keep changing the rules of the game. So regulation and policy needs to set the framework for the game to be played. Final question for you, Allan. So at a keynote, the opening keynote at the Jeff on Monday, we had a philosopher from the UK, Roman Scanaris, and he talked about the idea around long-term thinking and short-sightedness and how we need to really think long-term in the context of being good ancestors. I've become intrigued by the work Guggenheim is doing as it relates to infrastructure investment. So in an era when you have more and more people seeking quick hits or the quick basket, if you may, taking a quick shot, Guggenheim seemed to have placed their focus on long-term, the long game for addressing the global demand for infrastructure sustainability. Why have you all done that?
Well, that's a nice question, Lawrence, and thank you. I think that, let me give you a little background. When I started my business career, I was taught early that if one was fortunate enough to achieve success, they had an obligation to give back and take care of their community's needs. And the way, when I started in business a few years ago, was that, philanthropic. You had to balance your time and the resources you did to your business versus what you did to your philanthropy to try and help deal with the needs. But what started to develop when I started Guggenheim Securities, like 12 years ago now, amazingly, we started with a culture of philanthropy and giving and everything else, but it became very clear that we were moving into a period where, as we say, as the private sector has to take the lead, that more and more there was a real opportunity to build a culture around doing well by doing good. So we have embraced that there is profit with a purpose, and those should not be separated. So helping, companies that raise the capital, et cetera, is a good business for us, but also doing it behind companies and technologies that can help our planet, especially on Earth Day, is just profit with a purpose, and we feel very strongly about it.
Well, as we're preparing for the Jeff, this particular program, we've been working very closely with your team, Allan, and so I would now like to sort of give you the opportunity to introduce our distinguished guest, who is going to deliver a special Earth Day message. And I'll have you review who the guest is, and then I'll have you introduce him, and then we'll listen to his message. Over to you, Allan.
Thank you. It is my honor to introduce our next speaker. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, has dedicated much of his life to engaging the private sector to drive corporate, social, and environmental responsibility in a way that aligns people, nature, and planet. And after a lot of years of slowly rolling that ball up the hill, His Royal Highness noticed more recently a significant increase in engagement on these topics over the past couple of years. Encouraged by this, His Royal Highness launched his Sustainable Markets Initiative last year at Davos with the goal of engaging the private sector to take the lead in accelerating the transition to a sustainable future. 1 year later, His Royal Highness announced the Terra Carta, a living, breathing document forming the foundation of a sustainable future. And realizing that words alone were not enough, His Royal Highness established several task forces to focus on execution of the plans that we have been talking about here. So, esteemed members and guests of the EEI, please join me in extending a warm welcome to somebody who embodies all of the ethos of Earth Day, His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to have been invited by Allan Schwartz to join you today for the Global Electrification Forum. Over the past year, it has been truly inspiring to see how professionals from all over the world have come together to develop rapidly new technologies and solutions to address this crisis, from ventilators, the use of artificial intelligence to track the evolution of the virus, and new techniques for virus testing and vaccines. This has only demonstrated that it is indeed possible to come together to tackle common global challenges at a lightning pace. And this is where I can only stress that the same level of urgency and innovation must also be focused on the climate and biodiversity crises. After all, human health, economic health, and planetary health are fundamentally interconnected. I'm afraid, however, that we are fast running out of time now to rescue this poor old planet, and I need hardly emphasize that we desperately need the ingenuity of the power industry to bring solutions to the table while helping to advance their implementation and scale. This is why I am so encouraged by the opportunity to engage with the power industry and the members of the Edison Electric Institute. As we move to a clean energy future, the power industry will assume even greater importance, not just because the demand for electricity will increase, but also because alternative sources of energy will be required for clean, reliable baseload power. The power industry also has the potential to play a critical role in the production of clean fuels such as ammonia and hydrogen, molecules that provide stable, long-term energy storage and zero-carbon fuels for industry and commercial transportation. Increasingly, businesses are expected to be responsible global citizens, delivering returns not only for shareholders, but for society and for nature as well. After what I suppose is now very nearly 40 years of working on these issues in order to try and raise awareness of the critical need to tackle the twin threats of climate change and biodiversity loss, I've seen a sudden, dramatic shift in the engagement of the private sector and private finance over the past 2 years, as businesses and investors are finally beginning to recognize that building a sustainable future is the growth story of our time. To seize this incredible opportunity, we must now start pulling in the same direction, aligning country transition priorities with those of industry and investment. This accelerated and catalytic approach lies at the heart of my Sustainable Markets Initiative and my recently launched Terra Carta. After an intense year of convening the global private sector, I believe there are some fundamental ways the power industry, which quite literally powers all other industries, can play a helpful part of the solution. While there is no single silver bullet, progress is being made and a range of solutions are increasingly available. With this in mind, I would just like, if I may, to outline some specific actions that could be advanced with your help. Firstly, we must rapidly accelerate the research and development, production and adoption of clean energy solutions and systems. Secondly, we need dramatically to cut the time required to develop and deploy new technologies, just as we do or have to do during times of war, moving from decades to years and preferably months. Thirdly, we must invest at scale in practical projects to demonstrate the feasibility of new technologies. After all, it is only when projects are tangible that investors and consumers can generate the demand for their use. Fourthly, we must develop credible, independent roadmaps aligned with net zero, which accelerate the delivery, scale-up, infrastructure, investment and policy necessary. Fifthly, we must integrate net zero, disclosure of climate and nature-related impacts, and ESG standards and metrics into capital allocation and business decisions, as this is ultimately what is required to mainstream industry transition around the world. Sixthly, to accelerate the solutions to some of the most complex challenges, we must set up co-located multidisciplinary teams made up of industry, academia, and government. Seventhly, we need to educate consumers about the technologies that are emerging so they can help fuel the demand. Increasingly, consumers are looking for sustainable choices and will choose sustainable when it is competitively priced. Eighthly, and finally, you'll be glad to hear, we must acknowledge that sustainable solutions are technically possible. All the points that I have mentioned require government and industry to show clear and urgent leadership to accelerate the pace of change. Through the Terra Carta and with the support of my Sustainable Markets Initiative, we are developing decarbonisation roadmaps across industry verticals, working with countries on their transition plans and identifying how technology and investment can catalyse solutions at scale and in a way that can shift our trajectory towards a more sustainable future. Ladies and gentlemen, with the right investment and the right people, I believe that we can dramatically accelerate our efforts. To achieve this, my Sustainable Markets Initiative is actively building task forces with coalitions of the willing to drive the agenda forward. And I know, for instance, that Bill Brown, chairperson of 8 Rivers and co-founder of Net Power, who is a member of 2 of my SMI task forces, will be speaking to you all later today. So, ladies and gentlemen, the world urgently needs your help. We can no longer wait for others to act. Your ingenuity, practical skills, and ability to find solutions matter now more than ever. You all have an absolutely vital role to play as we develop and scale the technologies which will impact future generations, something I know you will be discussing at this very conference. With the stakes this high, I do so hope that you will take on this acceleration challenge with every ounce of urgency you can muster. With time running out so fast, I will certainly be watching carefully to see how much progress we can make. And I can only pray that you will join me in this most crucial of global efforts.
Thank you so much to Tom, Allan, and Lawrence for starting off Earth Day with such a great conversation. We'd like to especially thank His Royal Highness for his remarks and for his commitment to a sustainable future, as well as his leadership through both his Sustainable Markets Initiative and the work of his foundation.